So how do people become editors-in-chief for academic or scientific journals? About 7 years ago, when I was an early career researcher, I asked this question to so many journal editors at conferences or panel sessions or workshops. And fast forward 4 years, I then became an editor-in-chief myself. And in this video, I'm going to answer the question that I had asked but did not get answers to. I'm going to be sharing with you the journey that I took to becoming an editor-in-chief, and looking back, what were the behavior or actions or steps that I had taken that got me to becoming an editor-in-chief. First up, some statistics about editors-in-chief, particularly for those of you who are women and who want to become one. The statistics for women to become editors-in-chief, though, are pretty grim. In dermatology, for example, a 2017 study found that less than 19% of editors-in-chief for 25 journals are women. That is 26 female editors-in-chief compared to 128 male editors-in-chief. Another study found that female academics continue to be underrepresented on the editorial boards of 52 management journals. Another study found that, this is a lot of journals, so this is in mathematical sciences, and they looked at 435 journals, and they found that of the 13,067 editorships, only 8.9% are held by women. Shocking. In ecology and evolution journals, women were very poorly represented as editors. And in tourism, where I am in, they found that in top 20 tourism journals, only 21% are editors-in-chief. So what chance did I have looking at these statistics? But here I am an editor-in-chief for a reputable tourism journal. 3 years ago now, and I am going to share with you my journey of how I became one and what I think are the things that had helped me to get to where I am. So if you were to Google the criteria for becoming an editor-in-chief, you'll get advice such as having a PhD, having a good publication record, having a good H index, having an established reputation in your field, becoming a reviewer for other journals, and becoming editorial board members. But if you look around you, there are so many people who fulfill these criteria but are not yet editors-in-chief. So how does one actually become an editor-in-chief? So when I talk to journal editors, one of their advice is to set up your own journal by talking to a publisher and giving them your proposal or idea for a journal. But I didn't want to do this because I didn't want to market a journal that is new. I didn't want to set up a journal and an administration that has to go behind that. I didn't want to have to convince people to submit their manuscripts to a new journal that isn't yet ranked or has an impact factor. I wanted to go in and do the job of an editor rather than becoming the founding member and doing the groundwork to start a journal, if you know what I mean. So that's one option if you want to set up a new journal and you don't mind the groundwork that goes with it, is to send your proposal to a publisher in your field. And if you work with a university that has a university publisher, then that's often an easier path to go down. And that brings me to my first key point of how I became a journal editor, and that was knowing what my boundaries are, what I want or did not want to do. I had been offered the position of either an editor or a sub-editor or a managing editor in some of these journals in my field, and because they didn't have an impact factor, or they were very small, or nobody really knew about them, or they were small university-based journals that had the ambition to become big, I didn't think that I wanted that job, and I had said no. And I think that is key, saying no. If you want to watch, I have a video on how you say no so you can stay longer in academia and be more productive in academia. Click on this link here. But back to my point of setting up boundaries and saying no, I think by me saying no to becoming editors of those journals, I was freeing up space and waiting for something bigger, right? If I had taken up those roles, I would be too busy and too engrossed, or people will see that I already have a position with this journal and they wouldn't have asked me. So freeing up space and waiting for the right moment, I think, is important. You have a goal in mind and you keep your eye on the prize and you wait for the right opportunity to come along. Don't be fearful of missing out when an opportunity is presented to you if it's not you. And you know, sometimes we are in this fast-paced moments of everything, and you know, an opportunity, perhaps you're waiting to be confirmed or tenured, and you are, you know, waiting for you have applied for promotion, or you're thinking of applying for promotion, and then this opportunity came up and you don't feel like you could give up this opportunity, and you say yes, and then you get stuck in this position, because once you say yes, it's not a 1-year position, you know. It's usually a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract, typically a 3-year contract. My contract was a 3-year contract. So that's one. I think freeing up space is important. The second thing I wanted to say that got me to where I am looking back is that, for lack of a better word, I'm going to use Mark Manson's term, to give a fuck. I think I give a fuck. I think I give a fuck about many things in academia. I see everybody as a person, you know. When I submit a paper to a journal, I get very angry and disappointed when I was only treated as a manuscript number and not a person. And you know, like, we all wait in line. The publication process has become so mechanical and so metric centered that we forget that the people behind all these, that it is people behind all these. So the reviewers, the authors, the editorial board members. Who cares about editorial board members? The authors, only the authors care about the editor, or maybe even not. For lack of a better phrase, I'm going to use Mark Manson's book title, To Give a Fuck. I think the reason why I got my editorship was because I gave a fuck about the publication process. I was one of those people who was very much affected by the publication process, by the unfriendliness of it, by the crass, disrespectful process of submission and being accepted and being rejected. So I wanted to change this, and when I was interviewed for this position, I talked about this, I think maybe overly passionately, but the message came across that I wanted to change the culture of publication. And I think that's one of the reasons I got the job, because I gave a fuck. I actually gave a call to the former editor-in-chief of that journal, and you know, schedule an interview and a phone interview with him to ask him what his intention, his goal was for this journal, and what he thought about my ideas for bringing the journal forward, for leading the journal. I then made it clear to the publisher that I had talked to the older editor-in-chief, the former editor-in-chief, and then I presented my ideas for taking it forward should I get the job. I think not many people care enough about talking to the founding fathers of the journal, founding editors of the journal, and they kind of, you know, when people become editors, they bring their own idealism to the place. But I think it's important to see where someone has come from, who started the journal, and merged it to where you want to take it. Yes, of course you can do something different, but how do you also honor and respect the values that this person has brought to the journal? So this idea of giving a fuck is caring, right? Caring about the community you serve and caring about the values that you hold dear and bringing that to the forefront. It was scary thinking back of the kind of workshops that I did on gender equity in academia, but the courage to say that and speak it and present that, I think, featured me as someone who was vulnerable but brave or courageous enough to speak up. And people notice these things, right? So yes, you have 10 people in the room who have published, who have H-indexes, who have been reviewers, who have been, maybe some of them have been editorial board members. But what makes one person stand out? And I think looking back, and I'm not trying to brag, but just trying to look back and analyze, how I was noticed by another editor in that room where I was presenting in Bangkok at the time. And when I was interviewed for a position as editor-in-chief for his journal, he already knew who I was because he saw me presenting at this conference years ago on gender equity. I also remember that I was also very passionate about helping young or early career researchers. And at a conference in Bangkok, I was a keynote speaker for a doctoral colloquium, and I had brought along my books on how to become a successful or promising PhD scholar. And I remember speaking about that, and then one of the journal editors who was a keynote speaker at that event bought all of my books and gave them out generously as a gift to all the PhD students that were there at the conference. So that's again another thing, right? Because I cared, and I published a book about helping these people, and this book was featured. So I wasn't just an early career researcher at this conference, I wasn't just a guest speaker at the colloquium, but I was also someone who had already published a book, and this book was given out at this conference. So really caring about what you do and thinking about how, it's not even thinking about how you do it. I think it comes naturally when you care so passionately about something, and those are the things that will show people the kind of academic you are, and the perhaps the breath of fresh air in academia that may set you apart from other people who are doing the same thing that you do in your field, who are publishing on the same topic. Now I'm going to move on to what I call a humanizing approach to things. When I talk to editors, people say things like network with publishers, network with other academics. And I think networking is not a very positive word because it implies that you have your own personal agenda for approaching or talking to someone. I feel really uncomfortable with that approach. For me, when I talk to someone at a conference dinner, I genuinely want to know that person, and I make my decision then and then whether I want to have a continued relationship with that person, rather than this person has a certain status or position and I want to make an effort to like this person. It's never like that for me. So I think this humanizing approach is connecting with authenticity, right? And I think this is one of the key and this was one thing. I think the key thing, and this humanizing, this connecting with authenticity is the one thing that I think was instrumental in getting me this job. So let me give you an example of how this humanizing approach, I think, was instrumental in getting me an interview for the role of editor in this journal that I'm now currently spearheading. Several years ago, there was a conference in Dunedin, New Zealand, and Dunedin is a town where I had lived for 7 years, and that has a special place in my heart. So I wanted to share Dunedin with some of my bestest academic friends, and I had arranged to take a couple of them around in a car to some of the most beautiful spots of Dunedin. Then I saw on a Facebook page an acquaintance whom I've met from several conferences back, that she was going to be there, and she was all by herself. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, I know I'm taking so and so for a spin around the city, would you like to come? She said yes. We picked her up, and so the four of us ended up on a drizzly afternoon seeing Dunedin, and it was a great day. I had a great time. I hope that they did too. But fast forward that a few years, some time later, I can't remember, all the timelines are blur now, but she then became the editor-in-chief for a journal for Elsevier. And Elsevier owns many journals, many tourism journals. And when this role for the editor for my journal came up, they had asked all the editors of their journals to recommend some names for this role. And this person whom I had reached out and taken out on a ride in my car in Dunedin, she put forward my name. Now, at that time, I didn't think that I was even qualified to become an editor-in-chief, but the publisher called me and said that, my name came up on their list and I have been shortlisted to be interviewed for this role if I wanted it. So I think, that's an example of how an authentic connection with people makes people remember you. And yes, of course, you can have the publications and you have to have the H indices, or you have to have been a reviewer, you have had to have those experiences and credibility. But in our world of academia, there are so many bright people with equal or not, if not better, sets of qualifications or experience or H indices. I think, in all humility, I don't think that my H index is very high. I don't think that my publications are that impressive compared to some of my colleagues in the field, but I do care about the people that I serve. So yes, you do need to be a reviewer and you need to get on editorial boards. Also, you need to have good publications and a decent H index to be an editor-in-chief. But all our colleagues are equally capable and equally competitive. So I think the thing that will set you apart is bringing your values and your personality to the forefront and really giving a fuck or caring about what you do and the people that are being affected by your work. My thoughts of how I became an editor looking back, and they may not be scientific in any way, but I hope that they give you some idea or even inspiration for becoming an editor if you do want to become one. Leave some comments for me in the box below if you agree or disagree with any of these things that I've talked about. And if you do want to become an editor-in-chief, I encourage you to go for it despite the statistics for women or any other minority groups. So my final message is learn to say no and free up space to be ready for the position. So there you go, people. Learn to say no to the things that you don't really want to do, so you free up space for the things that you really want to do to fulfill the ambition that you have. Number two, give a fuck and really care about your values and the things that you love and bring those to the work that you do. Don't be afraid of showing people what you believe in through your work. And number three is to be human in the every decisions that we make, in the work that we do, in the people that we serve. Bye.